Good morning, everyone. I'm New York State Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. I thank you for joining us this morning. We're here to speak about a critically important case before the United States Supreme Court that poses a threat to workers and to state and local governments all over America. Before I begin, I just want to say that obviously, but it bears repeating, all of our thoughts and prayers are with the people in Paris and the families around the world who have suffered as a result of these hideous terrorist attacks. We all view ourselves as people who have dedicated ourselves to justice, and we certainly seek both justice and compassion for everyone affected by these attacks. Today, we're here to talk about another fight for justice, and I'm honored by the fact that we have many of the city and state's top labor leaders here, many union members and leaders and members from unions, including the leadership of the New York State AFL-CIO, the New York City Central Labor Council, representing SEIU, Hector Figueroa of 32BJ, the United Federation of Teachers, represented by Mike Mulgrew, AFSCME DC 37, and several of its locals are here, PEF, CSEA, Teamsters Locals 372 and 237, the Professional Staff Congress at CUNY, the New York State Nurses Association, and Laborers Local 79. I'm also particularly pleased to be joined by my colleague from Connecticut, Attorney General George Jepsen, who is a leader among attorneys general in this fight for workers' rights and for state sovereignty. In addition to the leadership of labor that's here with us today, we have many other public officials, including Public Advocate Tish James, Congressmember Jerry Nadler, Congresswoman, is Carolyn here? No, not Carolyn Maloney. Hakeem.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Standing to my left, Congressmember Hakeem Jeffries, Senators, State Senators Adriana Espaillat, Liz Kruger, Brad Hoylman, Assembly Member Chuck Levine, and Council Member Helen Rosenthal. Is Mark Traeger here? Yes. Council Member Mark Traeger. I miss anyone? Oh, Matthew Eugene, also joining us here. Huh? Oh, and I didn't get Gail? I apologize. Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer and Assembly Member Guillermo Linares. The turnout today reflects the seriousness of the case that we are here to address. I'm proud to announce that a coalition of more than 20 states' attorneys general from around the country has filed an amicus brief in the U.S. Supreme Court in a case that has the potential to undermine vital protections that unions provide to workers in New York, Connecticut, and in states across America. This is a case that has the potential to undermine the rights of states like New York and Connecticut to promote collective bargaining and ensure labor peace. The case is called Friedrichs versus the California Teachers Association. It focuses on whether or not public school teachers who are covered by a collective bargaining agreement can be required to pay their fair share of the costs of collective bargaining and the fair share of the cost of the administration of the agreement, including grievance procedures. Under established law, unions have a legal duty to fair representation that requires them to seek better wages, benefits, and working conditions for all members of any bargaining union, whether they are union members or not. In return, New York, Connecticut, and many other states require all workers to chip in to pay their fair share of the costs of collective bargaining. They're not required to join a union, but they're required to pay their fair share of the work to get them their wages and benefits. In the Friedrichs case, the plaintiffs seek to destroy this system of fair representation paid for by a fair share from every worker. Plaintiffs are asking the Supreme Court to allow non-union workers to be free riders, giving them the benefits of a union's work in negotiating better wages or conditions while not paying their fair share of the costs of collective bargaining from which they benefit. The plaintiffs are also seeking, and this is an important point for all of us in state and local government, they're also seeking to take away the rights of states like New York and Connecticut to manage our own labor relations as we see fit. This case is actually quite simple. It's about fairness, it's about justice, and it's about protecting the American middle class. This case has the potential to eviscerate the middle class and begin to unravel more than a century of progress in workers' rights. That's why I'm proud to join with Attorney General Jepsen and many other colleagues to demand that the Supreme Court protect workers' rights and reject the plaintiffs' efforts to dismantle our system of collective bargaining. The Friedrichs litigation is part of an ongoing effort by anti-worker conservatives, anti-labor conservatives, to undermine America's resurgent labor movement. The rise of labor here in New York and in many other states has some people very nervous. And if you consider what we've accomplished in the last few years together, the resurgence of labor is phenomenal. The Fight for 15 has mobilized millions of Americans to increase the minimum wage. Here in New York, Governor Cuomo has already announced the raise of salaries for all state workers to $15 an hour. Low-wage workers, the poorest of the working poor, are rising up. Here in New York, thousands of workers have come forward to report wage theft to my office, and we have recovered over the last 3 years more than $21 million for more than 17,000 workers whose wages and tips were being stolen. Many of those low-wage workers are now organizing into unions themselves. And for the first time, I've worked with our colleagues in labor to force major national retailers like the Gap, Abercrombie, and J. Crew to stop the life-destroying practice of on-call scheduling. We have already stopped on-call scheduling, where you have to call in right before a shift to find out if you're going to work or not. We've stopped it for more than 230,000 retail workers so far, so they can plan for their lives and plan for second jobs and child care and elder care. Brothers and sisters in the labor movement in New York and all across America know the movement is rising. Things are turning for the better, and the Friedrichs case is intended to break that momentum. If the plaintiffs win this case, we will see unions weakened all over America. We cannot allow the Supreme Court to do that, and we will not allow the Supreme Court to do that. The established law is strong. It supports labor peace and collective bargaining agreements in thousands of bargaining units across the country. We're not going to allow the Supreme Court to dismantle this system that has preserved the vital provision of public services by state and local governments for decades. So I'm very proud of the amicus brief we've filed. I commend it to you, and we will continue to stand with our brothers and sisters in labor, united, until justice is done. And with that, it is my great honor to bring up my colleague from Connecticut, a true ally in the fight for workers' rights and a leader in the cause of stopping the Friedrichs plaintiffs from succeeding, Attorney General George Jepsen. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you for your leadership on this critical issue and for inviting me to be a part of today's important announcement. You know, I began my career out of law school as staff counsel to the Carpenters Union Local 210 for Western Connecticut, and for nearly 10 years, it was my job every day to get up and go to work and be an advocate for working families. Since entering public life, I've had occasional disagreements with public sector unions in Connecticut, but we've always shared very common base principles. Principles like the importance of public service and of providing the highest quality service for our constituents. Principles such as promoting equality in the workplace and ensuring a fair wage for an honest day's work. And I know from my 16 years as a state legislator and my nearly 5 years as Connecticut's Attorney General that our public sector unions play a vital role in the effective operation of state government. I also know that to deprive states of the ability to use effective and proven fair share model in collective bargaining will undermine this important role. And that's exactly what the Friedrichs plaintiffs are setting out to do. You know, the great city of New York and other municipalities across our country still remember the bad old days of walkouts and work stoppages, the strikes and economic damage of a time when government and its employees lacked the right tools to resolve disagreements about contracts, wages, schedules, and benefits. We still remember the garbage piling up in the streets of New York in the 1960s. We still remember the transit strikes that crippled commerce in our cities. And we still remember the impact of these times on our society, and we are here today to help make sure that the United States Supreme Court remembers them as well. The system only works if both negotiating partners, the state and the union, are capable of engaging in honest, good faith, and knowledgeable discussions. States have a compelling interest in avoiding strikes and labor breakdowns that threaten the ability of government to provide essential services. But without strong and stable public sector unions, this would become an intractable problem once again. Many states have long structured their labor relations to include agency fee or fair share agreements. And fair share agreements make sense. They say very simply that all of those who benefit from collective bargaining should help to pay for it. You don't have to support the political activities of the union, but you cannot be a free rider. It is just not fair. Now, nothing about fair share agreements harms anyone in any way that would remotely justify disrupting settled agreements, upending negotiating practices that have proven effective, and voiding contracts that are in place. So I am honored to stand here today to declare my support for this amicus brief and to join Eric and my other fellow state attorneys general in asking the Supreme Court to do what is simply right and just. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, George. We've also been joined by Assemblywoman Latrice Walker, and we'll be walking with the walker later. Now it's a great honor to bring up our leader, our state leader from the New York State AFL-CIO, Mario Cilento.
Thank you, Eric. First, I want to say thank you on behalf of the entire labor movement in this state to the efforts of Attorney General Eric Schneiderman for leading this fight, for standing up with the 2.5 million members in this state and really standing up for all of the union members throughout our country and standing up against the wealthy special interests who are leading this fight. Because those wealthy special interests who are leading this fight are part of a concerted and coordinated effort not only to attack the labor movement in general, not only to attack our public sector unions, but to attack and silence the voice of all working men and women in this country. That's what this is about, because the labor movement is the vehicle to provide the collective voice and for collective action on behalf of working men and women. And what they want to do is to silence that voice, and by silencing that voice, drive down the wages, benefits, and conditions of employment of working men and women. Because the facts are the facts, and when they want this country to ignore the simple facts of that union members on average earn 30% more in wages than non-union members, that 92% of union members have health care derived from their employer as opposed to only 68% of non-union workers, and that union members are far more likely to have a guaranteed pension than non-union members. And as a result of that, the labor movement is able to raise the standard of living and the quality of life for all working people. And what the wealthy special interests who are bringing this case want to do is to drive down those wages, benefits, and conditions of employment to bolster their own bottom line. So, Eric, I want to thank you for leading this fight, standing with the labor movement, and understanding that the collective voice and the collective action of the labor movement is not only something that we all support here, but is vitally necessary not only to our members, but to all working men and women. Because study after study has shown that when union members do well, when the labor movement is thriving, we not only raise that standard of living and quality of life for union members, but we raise that standard of living and quality of life for all Americans to go through and have a thriving economy in this country. So, Eric, thank you for that. And I just want to be very clear about one other thing, and Eric touched upon it. Regardless of how this verdict comes down this spring, the labor movement in this country is here to stay. We are not going anywhere. We'll discuss strategies and we'll plan for whatever may come. But the labor movement will continue to be the vehicle in this country to provide for collective action and a collective voice so that working men and women in this country can stand together and join together and fight together and raise their voices together collectively to speak to workplace issues in the United States of America. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And now the head of the New York City Central Labor Council, a great friend and a great ally in the struggle, Vinny Alvarez.
Thank you to our Attorney General, and thank you to all the electeds for coming out here today in what is the heart of organized labor here in America, where we have 1 in 4 workers unionized. You know, the sad truth is that the economy today, the American economy, has a massive, massive hole that's leaving workers behind, and the balance is enormous. Workers are working harder today than they've ever worked. They're working longer than they've ever worked. And they're doing everything they can to get by, forget about getting ahead a little bit for them and their families. So what we need to do is make sure that we can do everything that we can to stand with those workers, to make sure those workers' rights are protected. They see the rules today tilted heavily against them in the favor of corporate CEOs, big banks, and the wealthiest and the richest in our society. And there are a few people out there that are defending workers more and more throughout this society and throughout America today than organized labor who's fighting with our elected officials like we have here today to stand up for the middle class and create an economy that works for all. And this case threatens all of that. The reality is everyday workers have a right to their voice on the job, to stand together, to come together, to fight for the things which we know are going to lift up themselves, their families, and their communities. A voice at work to talk about issues that affect wages, benefits, safety in the workplace, and create an economy that truly does work for all. So we will continue to stand for their rights, not only here in New York City, but throughout New York State and throughout this country, and with all of our elected officials and friends and allies in this fight for working Americans. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And now representing AFSCME, which are leaders in the fights for the rights of public employees all across America, Henry Garrido of DC 37.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Let me be first thank Eric and the other attorney generals for the support of working men and women. You know, this case is about three fundamental things. Three fundamental lies have been repeated over and over again. First, there's mandatory unionism. The fact is, any member who does not want to join a union has an option to not be a part of the union. Second, the union uses political dollars for things that the members are fundamentally against, therefore violating the freedom of speech. Any member who chooses to have that political expenditures, disagrees with it, has a right to get that money returned. And lastly, the unions are undemocratic unions, entities that are now beginning to speak on behalf of the workers, not on behalf of everyday working people. Well, the fact remains that unions remain one of the most democratic entities that still remain. So what we're looking at here is nothing different than what we saw in the Citizens United case that has devastated our political process. We are here in support of working people. We are here to tell the Supreme Court working men and women need a voice, and that voice is often at a union. We are here in support of those workers. And I'm going to, on behalf of AFSCME, on behalf of our members, thank those who are here in support of labor, and we're going to continue the fight, not just in the Supreme Courts, but in the streets. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Henry.
Thank you. And now, representing United Federation of Teachers, a great ally, great friend, Michael Mulgrew.
Thank you, Eric. I want to thank all the elected officials who are here today and to all the attorney generals who are gathering and joining us in this fight. And I don't want to discuss the facts of this case that's already been discussed. Let's just get to the heart of this. There has been a systematic attack over the last couple of decades by a small group of people. As wealth in the United States has grown, the majority of people have not prospered from it. Only a very few have. This is part of their continued, coordinated, systematic attack on the middle class and the working people of this country. Citizens United was a joke, as we all know. A corporation is not a person. So as we move forward now, let the facts of this case stand on the legal side, but let this be a call to everyone in this country about what is really going on here. A few folks now want to silence what they consider to be the last groups, unions, to stand up against them. And I am sure that they believe that our voices should not be heard because we do not have their wealth and they don't think we are equal to them. But that is too bad. This is America. And people have a right to organize, to have their voices heard. So as this case moves forward, let it be clear to everyone what this is really about. The continued effort of a very few people to try to obtain more wealth and power for themselves at the expense of everyone else. And I thank everyone who is here again today. Thank you.
And now representing SEIU, which has provided so much leadership in the fight for low-wage workers, and here again providing leadership, Hector Figueroa of 32 BJ.
I want to thank Attorney Generals Eric Schneiderman and George Jepsen and all elected officials who are standing here with us today. I agree with everything that has been said before. And I think that the call to action for us right now is to really do two things. We need to continue to organize workers so our voice will not be silenced by the Friedrichs case and by the ongoing corporate attack. But we also need to remind ourselves that these attacks are more than simply attacks on the organization of working people. They are attacks directed at workers themselves. These are efforts to prevent workers from having a strong voice in the workplace to create good jobs and a strong voice in our communities and the political process to build a better society. And with me, I have today two of such workers. Michael Carey from our airports campaign, he's a worker at Kennedy, and Ron Wade from our school's DOE division.
Good afternoon. My name is Ron Wade. I'm a school cleaner in Manhattan for 13 years. Before I start, I want to just send my prayers out to people in France for their lost their loved ones. And truly, we know as Americans, we know what it is to have a terrorist attack on our lands, and we know we strongly support them in their grieving process. I'm here because I believe in organizing, being able to organize as a union. And truly, it's, to me, I don't understand why they wouldn't allow us as citizens our right to organize. You know, I understand big business have money. That's all we have is a right to organize. I thank God that I have a union, that when I don't have the funds myself to fight big business, I have a union to come together and help me fight for the rights to be able to feed my family each and every day, have a right to send my children to the best schools every day. But without unions, we have no voice. Together, that's how our voices are held. You know, they hide behind their money, but together as brothers and sisters, we come together to fight, to stand strong, and let the country know that we are one voice, one union. And I thank Hector Figueroa as my union president, who's been fighting each and every day for us to have a right voice. I thank for Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, all the attorney generals across the country who's standing strong on this point, because truly we cannot allow big business to run this country, because without us having a voice, what else can we do? And I thank God for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Michael Carey. I'm a security officer at JFK Airport. And me and my colleagues and co-workers have been fighting for better wages. And with 32BJ, we are winning that fight. Now, when these, in the case of the Friedman, am I saying it right?
Friedrichs.
Yeah, the Friedrich case. When these corporations are trying to stop us from getting this voice out, then we have to stand up as workers and let our voice be heard, that we will fight against this at all times. I'm just coming from work. It's 4 o'clock this morning, and I have to be back at work again at 2 o'clock today, and it's all so difficult. So when these millionaires are trying to fight against us from having a voice, then we're going to stand up and we're going to say no. And thank you, Mr. Schneiderman, and all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And now, representing the Professional Staff Congress, Barbara Bowen.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Eric Schneiderman and the other attorneys general across the country for taking a stand on this critical issue. And I'm very proud to be here with elected officials who are standing up, especially with workers who've just spoken to us, and with all my labor colleagues. This is a fight not just about one case, and not even just about unions. This is a fight about all working people, because the plaintiffs behind Friedrichs, who are not just casual, independent beings, they are backed and found by a group of wealthy, finance class individuals and corporate interests, the Koch brothers included, who want to make sure that the poor in this country stay poor and that the middle class becomes poor. That's what this is about. Unions have historically lifted the conditions for all working people, and we're doing that right now. The end of the 16-hour day, the end of the 7-day work week, that occurred because of union fights, but it spread to all workers. So this case is about making sure that the power of working people is diluted and eviscerated. It's making sure that black and brown Americans who have been lifted up by unions are kept powerless, that women are kept powerless, and that the biggest challenge to the austerity agenda and inequality in this country, which has been mounted systematically by unions, that challenge does not survive. And we are here to say we will challenge and challenge and challenge, and we will do that because we organize. So we're very proud to be here and so grateful to the attorneys general, especially Eric Schneiderman in our own state, for taking this strong, beautiful public stand. Thank you.
Thank you. Note that we've also been joined by Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney. And now we're going to hear on behalf of PEF from our good friend Wayne Spence. Is Wayne not here? Well, in that case, Greg here? Yes. Okay, in that case, we're going to hear from a great advocate for a union near and dear to my heart and the hearts of the members of my family, the Teamsters, Greg Floyd.
Thank you. At this point in the press conference, the only thing I could say is thank you for caring, and thank you for showing up, and thank you for showing your support.
Thank you. And thank you for being brief. Now, our last labor leader, I think we were going to hear from Jill Ferrillo of the New York State Nurses.
I want to thank Attorney General Eric Schneiderman and also the Attorney General from Connecticut. As we all know, unions go hand in hand with a very strong middle class. In our profession, our noble profession of nursing, it's truly been the unions that have been able to give a strong voice to nurses who have fought to have better wages and better working conditions. But most importantly, to have the voice that speaks for the patients in all healthcare settings. And because of the union, the nurses have been able to advocate for those patients, and those patients have been able to get better care. The nurses have been able to advocate for everybody who deserves to have access to health care. That is because the unions have given them that voice. We stand with all our brothers and sisters in the labor movement and all of our elected officials who support the unions today, because we stand united in ensuring that that voice continues for women, for everyone who has not had the voice in the past. So we thank the Attorney Generals for being here with us today, and we will continue to fight. We're not going anywhere. We're going to continue to organize. We're going to continue to advocate for our patients, and we hope that you will join with us. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we're going to hear from New York City's public advocate and a former assistant New York State Attorney General, most importantly, Tish James.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, and to all the Attorney Generals and my colleagues in government here today. This is quite frankly an attack on workers, but I think it's really critically important that everyone know that the current system that is in place was a compromise of a case several years ago. And the agency shop arrangement benefits government, unions of members of unions and non-unions alike, non-union members alike, who should not receive a free ride. And basically, this years of established case law has made it possible for employees to stick together to improve working conditions and benefits. We simply are urging that swing vote, that one vote that really can make a difference and overturn established law. We urge them to exercise some judicial restraint in this case, because if the Supreme Court strikes down this case, it will only bolster the principles in Citizens United and will bolster and empower the rich donor class in this country. A rich donor class which has basically hijacked our government to serve the interests of the rich and the powerful. I stand here today on behalf of all workers in this city and in this country, and I urge, again, the United States Supreme Court to exercise restraint, because this will strike a blow to the middle class and to working people in this city. I thank you, and I thank the Attorney General for allowing me to say a few words.
Thank you. And now we're going to hear from Congressman and great leader and personal hero of mine, Congressman Jerry Nadler.
Well, thank you very much. Let me begin by thanking Attorney General Schneiderman for taking the lead in this, and Attorney General Jepsen and all the other attorneys general who are working on this very important matter. I'm proud to join Attorney General Schneiderman in the call to protect workers' rights and urge the U.S. Supreme Court to uphold the rights of unions to collectively bargain with management, because that is what is at stake. If this decision goes the wrong way, the ability to collectively bargain, the financial ability to do that, will be destroyed in the public or greatly weakened in the public sector. Our laws have long recognized the rights of states to determine the mode of collective bargaining, and most have determined the current system. Now there is and unions must be able to fight on behalf of their members. They have to be able to mount a strong united defense against big business and large employers who spend too much time worrying about profits and not enough time worrying about the treatment of hardworking people. Whether it is a fair wage or key benefits like paid family and medical leave, unions have helped millions of Americans obtain decent wages and livable working conditions in this country. One of the great tragedies of the last several decades, and one of the main causes of income inequality and the hollowing out of the middle class, is the suppression and weakening of our country's labor unions, especially in the private sector. Organized labor and liberal government actions like the GI Bill created the middle class. Their suppression is destroying the middle class and destroying social mobility. Now, there's been recently a resurgence, especially in the public sector, a resurgence of unions. And now there is an attempt, in the name of free speech, to cut unions off at the knees. The legal philosophy being deployed is essentially the same that led the Supreme Court for a 40-year period to declare minimum wage and maximum hour laws and factory safety and child labor laws unconstitutional as violating freedom of contract. We must not return to that era. We must not return to an era in which workers have no rights and all the wealth and all the power in society goes to the very top. This case would bar unions from collecting fees to pay for their ongoing expenses of representing all the workers. Weaker unions mean less pay for everyone, longer hours, and less ability to access key benefits like affordable health insurance, paid sick leave, and reasonable retirement benefits. If unions are handcuffed in their ability to protect their members, which this case would do, it will end up hurting all American workers who depend on unions to represent their voice and the interests of the negotiating table. There is no middle class in this country. There is no upward mobility in this country without a strong labor movement. This is an attempt to destroy that. It must be stopped.
Thank you. And now another great colleague and warrior in Washington, Representative Carolyn Maloney.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you so much to our Attorney General Eric Schneiderman and to all the Attorney Generals that are fighting and standing up for workers. This is an incredibly important case that they are carrying the position of workers forward. This nation was not built with gold and silver. It was built with labor. Labor was the first advocates for a reasonable workday, protection of workers. Most of our great social programs and ideas came out of the labor movement. The middle class came out of the labor movement. Now people are concerned that the gap between the haves and the have-nots is growing. This is a direct result of the assault by the right on the rights of labor and their efforts to diminish the power and the effectiveness of labor. They have been absolutely essential to the great American middle class, increasing wages, improving the quality of life for generations. But the percentage of unionized private sector workers has declined dramatically over the last 60 years, from a peak of 35% to just 6.6% today. And it has had a real impact on wages, retirement, security, benefits for the middle class, and the ability to achieve the American dream for millions of Americans. And this did not happen by accident. There's been a direct, organized assault on workers' rights and unions by many on the right, and they're trying to do the same thing now to public employee unions. With this lawsuit, nearly 36% of public employees belong to a union today. That's the same rate it was a decade ago, and we need to protect it. 25 states have instituted a right to work that does nothing but strip workers' rights, and the results are in. Workers in states make nearly $6,000 less each year than in states with strong collective bargaining rights. On the campaign trail, you'll hear the right vilify union members and candidates and call for collective bargaining to be destroyed. But we know better. We need to protect it. This is an important case. This is just another example of the anti-union, anti-worker agenda of the Republican Party and the right wing. So we need to stand with organized labor and support Attorney General Schneiderman, and the colleagues he is organizing are absolutely right to weigh here on behalf of public employees and their unions. I'm proud he's on the front lines defending good jobs and values that strengthen our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. And now another of our heroes from Washington, Representative Hakeem Jeffries.
Let me first just thank Attorney General Schneiderman for his tremendous leadership on this very important issue and the wonderful service that he continues to provide to the people of the great state of New York. It's an honor and a privilege for me to stand here today with so many distinguished colleagues in government and, of course, labor leaders from almost every sector who are here unified to push back against this egregious attempt by the wealthy and the well-off in this country to continue to try to crush the hopes and the aspirations of hardworking Americans. I stand here today as the child of two public employee union members who recognize that I get the benefit, I've received the benefit of the collective bargaining that took place in order to provide both my parents and my younger brother with a pathway toward more robustly pursuing the American dream. That's something that we need to maintain for everyone. On the merits, this is a pretty simple case. Under law, unions are obligated to collectively bargain for both members and non-members. That means that non-members get the benefit of the fair and strong wages collectively bargained by those unions. Non-members get the benefit of working conditions that are decent and adequate as a result of that collective bargaining. Non-members get the benefit of the health care that is negotiated by those unions. Non-members get the benefit of the pension packages that allow them to retire with dignity and respect. They've gotten the benefit of the collective bargaining representation. They should contribute their fair share for the collective good. But this, of course, is not about legal principle. This is not about fairness or justice or equity. It's about an attack on working families and organized labor here in the United States of America. It's an attack that increasingly has taken the form of the Supreme Court. That was the case with Citizens United, to blow a hole in our political system and allow a handful of people to dominate the political process. Supreme Court was again used as it relates to eviscerating Section 4 and Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act to try and disenfranchise people all across this country. And now we see the Supreme Court again being abused as part of this invidious campaign for the wealthy and the well-off to maintain power over everyone else in this country. And we're not going to let it happen. That's why I'm proud to stand with Attorney General Schneiderman and all of our colleagues in government.
Thank you. Thank you. And finally, we want to hear from someone who's been a strong supporter of the labor movement and a great ally in progressive politics, Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer.
I want to echo the accolades for our wonderful Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, and I go to a lot of press conferences, but this is a very special one with a very committed and dedicated group of elected officials and labor leaders. I just want to add another piece to why this is so important. I've been fighting for a lot of issues over the years, things like domestic workers, things like paid sick days, things like immigration reform. And guess what? Even though the labor unions may not have workers that benefit because they already have a lot of these rights, The labor union came forward for domestic workers, came forward for paid sick days, comes forward on a regular basis for immigration reform, and the list goes on and on and on. And I am sure that the individuals behind this case understand that. They don't want paid sick days. They don't want immigration reform, and they certainly don't want their domestic workers to have rights. And so the fact of the matter is, this group of people today bringing this issue forward to the public is incredibly important. And my one word is to thank the Attorney Generals for bringing us together, to thank the unions, all these elected officials for understanding these issues are broader even than the wonderful benefits that their members have, and that these organizations, these labor unions, have been struggling and working with all of us to change American society for the better. So thank you very much, Eric Schneiderman, and we look forward to continuing working on these issues, and the hell with the Supreme Court, they don't do the right thing. Thank you.
And with that, thank you all for being here. The attendance today reflects the seriousness of this matter. We are determined to stop the Supreme Court from overturning established law. A reversal of the earlier decisions in this case would be nothing less than a radical intervention in the efforts of states and cities like New York and New York City all across America to develop their own systems of collective bargaining. The current system requires no state or city to enter into a collective bargaining system. It requires no state and no city to provide for a fair share payment for those who benefit from collective bargaining, but are free to choose not to join the unions. This is a permissive system. Allow us in New York to run things the way we want to and to achieve labor peace so that our citizens can thrive. Let's not let the Supreme Court radically intervene to alter a system that's working well. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and we'll take some questions. Thank you. Okay.